utilization is a KPI, and it's being driven, right? The thing with driving utilization is, and honestly, I just learned this a few years ago, is that there is a direct, inverse, exponential correlation between utilization. The higher your utilization, the longer your queue times are going to be in any department.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. A CEO has a tough job. Not many ever get there. Some can't handle the stress, and the others just don't understand what is required to get there. And the ones who get there might not survive for very long unless they figure out how to track the right KPIs to maintain the health of the organization, to maintain the sustainability goals, to meet sales and profit targets, to meet shareholder and board expectations, to meet stock price goals. So which are the KPIs that are most critical for a CEO? And what do they need to do to align their systems and processes to meet them? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss the top KPIs for CEOs. We discussed the best KPIs that CEO should be measuring and how to balance the macro versus micro view. Finally, we discussed the KPIs that are meaningless, but some CEOs might track, leading to employee frustrations and wasted operational efficiencies. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. And this is our first show for this year of this series. And we are going to be starting a very interesting series about KPIs. And we are going to discuss the KPIs related to pretty much every single role, as well as the industry that you probably have experienced. So we are going to have a lot of fun discussing that, as long as we have our internet and technology with us, which has been fun today. So before we start with today's session, we are going to start with everybody's intros. If you don't know me, I am Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to Chris. And Chris, I don't know if you are seeing the delay at your end as well. It looks a little funnier. So, when I'm looking at myself, I'm losing track. So I'll just give you a hint there. But yeah, please start with your...
Hi, Chris Giardini, owner and president of Turnkey Technologies. We're a 29-year-old Microsoft partner organization deploying Microsoft Dynamics. So great topic, key performance indicators, in case you don't know what a KPI is. Okay, so we'll start there by giving you a definition.
So much for breaking that down, Chris. Really appreciate that. On that note, I am going to move to Rajesh for his intro. And Rajesh froze. I don't know if he's still with us. Is he? This is going to be fun today. Okay, how about we move to Mark? Mark is moving. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Lilly, President and CEO of LillyWorks. We help manufacturers improve their production performance. So very excited. There are a number of very important KPIs manufacturing companies look at in regards to that. And I'm very excited to talk about what I might perceive as some of the positive ones and some of the negative.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for joining, Mark. Mike, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure, Sam. I'm Mike Schlagenhofer, and I'm a manufacturing consultant for a property and casualty insurance carrier that covers about 7,500 manufacturing companies in the United States. And in that role, I'm a lot of times get called into a company and help them identify what isn't going well on one of the questions we have. And Chris explained it very well. What do you measure? How do you measure it? Before, if you can't measure it or if I haven't measured, you can't improve.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for joining, Mike. And Paul, can I ask you to introduce yourself next? Seems like the technology is working for you now when it is not working for anybody else, I guess. Over to you, Paul. You're on mute, Paul.
Let's try that.
Yeah, good, go.
Technology is great when it works. Okay. Yeah. It's the nut that holds the wheel on that travel. Okay. So we're implementation-driven consultants that help companies develop immediate, enthusiastic buy-in to change across the company in one day, and then use the participation and contribution to achieve transformational improvements in productivity and support for growth.
Love the pitch. Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate it. Rajesh, do we have you with us now? Can you introduce yourself next? He's probably still froze. I don't know what's going on. Today is a crazy day. Maybe StreamYard is not paying their cloud bills. They should be paying that. The economy is not as great, so technology companies are not doing as great, I guess. Okay, we'll wait for Rajesh and then we'll move to the topic. Okay, if you are in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments. We typically try to cover them during the show. If we run out of time, then we'll make sure that you receive your answers. On that note, in the audience, I'm going to throw one question. I am looking for your personal KPI, the favorite one that you track for yourself. If you could comment that in the chat box, I'll really appreciate that. On that note, I am going to move to Chris for any of the top KPIs. And Chris, you might want to limit yourself to just 3 because then other people cannot talk about anything else.
I'm going to talk about everything, so there's nothing to talk about. I don't think that's the case. And I think thanks, Sam. But as an intro, you think about favorite KPIs. It's like perspectives. What do you do? What's your job? My favorite, your favorite, 2 different favorites, depending on roles, but in industry from that point. But I think at a macro level, KPIs, financial, operational, system performance. Everybody's like, why do I need system performance KPIs? We've got to make sure that machine's running, right? We're not just looking at how fast the car is going, but what's going on. So if you think about, a vehicle being a great example, but in the world of ERP, and I think as an owner, and I've run a company for 29 years, and I'm like, okay, what's the most important KPI to me? The ones that jump to mind is I was utilization. Utilization has always been one of mine because I'm a professional services business.
Yeah.
However, utilization alone is not enough. It could be misleading. And I think as you look at, the financials behind utilization, you need more. And I think even as, my background, I'm technical, comp sci math, so I'm really into numbers. But backlog is another interesting one. Everybody's like, well, what does that mean? Well, how much backlog do I have? What's my undelivered work? If you think about, signed contracts, unfulfilled contracts, that's a backlog. Meaning, and again, in the professional services world, you say, oh, I've got 1 day of backlog. Well, that's a problem. Again, a month, 6 months. 6 months might be too much, right? Customer service is a problem. So if you think about backlog, but backlog is an important indicator because, again, for me, it's gauging, well, how well is sales effectiveness? And again, are the delivery and the implementation teams going to stay busy? Are they going to run out of work? So as you think about what are those indicators that help you plan, and the other one is pipeline. So we talk about backlog, which is book business. Now I'm looking at pipeline, which is, okay, what's heading towards the backlog, right? And utilization is talking about how are we delivering. So there's really 3 big areas, right? What's coming in, what's in, not started, what's started and it's running. But, and those aren't enough. And I think that, and some of those are operational. Some of those, it sounds like sales, it sounds like project performance. But if you're a finance guy, there's a lot of different, and I've never worn the hat where I look at what's your debt to equity ratio? I don't look at that on a daily basis. It's an interesting one. What's your return on capital? Well, that's another one that I don't worry about on a daily basis. Cash flow is an interesting one. And normally as you look at, what is the metric? Is it a cash flow statement? And I think so as you think about what does that mean looking at cash flow? Well, people are trying to predict, and we go back to what I said. backlog utilization. Again, if we're going to the subledgers and cash flow, we're looking at receivable. What are my average days to pay? Meaning, if I have net 30 terms, are people paying me 30? Are they paying me 60? Are they paying me 90? And so, predictability, and then as you add a few more that all relate to cash. Okay, so cash is that other big thing that drives the organizations. And most people are still booking business on an accrual basis. And I'm going to tell you what, it could be funny money. So if you're an owner and you want to really get empirical statistics, which they're not going to move because accrual accounting, hey, I made a journal entry. Look, we have more revenue, more profit. It doesn't mean anything. But if you look at cash, and if cash is that underlying theme in a business, and you may be accrual based, but how do you get cash based performance? So a lot of people don't look at a balance sheet on a rolling 12 month. Everybody's like, well, why would I look at it like that? Well, again, you're looking at, and again, we're going graphical. So if you think about even taking a step back in analytics and KPIs, are you reading numbers, or are you looking at graphs and charts that have green, yellow, and red? Right? Red is action. So again, I'm moving from logically in my world, right? Services, operational metrics, but I came back to cash because cash is still going to tell you, well, what's really going on in the business? Meaning, and if we look at that rolling 12, is cash dropping? Is receivables climbing? Okay, those are inverse curves. And I made an example to somebody the other day that if you looked at a rolling 12 and you saw cash and AR going down at the same time, but sales looks okay, there's a problem with your accounting because, right? It's okay if cash goes down and AR goes up, right? But if cash and AR are going down and sales looks okay, well, there's a problem with sales because sales booking to AR, we should see, right, inverses. Now, we don't want AR to go up and cash to go down, right? But that's still an indicator that, hey, is my days sales outstanding growing? And you wonder, well, which one gets the CEO's attention? As we talk about graphical, right? What's impactful? Is it cash? Is it looking at what's happening here? Again, is it this backlog where, hey, I don't have enough backlog, and how quickly can sales close deals to replenish a backlog because the concerns are, right? What happens? It's cash flow. We're going to have sales are going to drop. Why is cash going to drop? Because I'm still paying my people. Ooh. And again, there's a lot of complex KPIs that can come together. That you're listening to. What's the most important one? Well, Sam says pick 3. I'm like, okay, well, you heard the first 3, but once you get the first 3, you still got to come back and validate by looking at cash. And I think that cash is. I mean, I could talk more about cash, but I think you've heard my top 3.
Yeah, so
Room for others.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be a very passionate topic in general when we talk about KPIs. I think there is just so much to talk about, and we are going to get very fresh insights from everybody that I think we personally didn't have that. So probably it's going to be a good learning for us as well. And I believe everybody is either the CEO in the room as well or have been the CEO. So that's a good thing, right? All CEOs talking, I guess. So, Chris, in your commentary, there are a lot of different layers. And obviously, there are going to be some CEOs that are really good at that macro. And some CEOs are not so good. I mean, they want to get into everything. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, okay. So here, and by the way, one more comment related to what you described that, back to equity and return on capital, you don't look on a daily basis. We were talking the whole year last year that everybody should care for accounting, and now we don't care for financial KPIs.
I don't care about them. Different, but on a daily basis, and I think it comes back to that is what's your operational KPI? And I think one of the things I need to emphasize is real-time data. Yeah. I can't be looking at this stuff 45 days old. I can't. I need to see it now. I need to see it I need to look at last week, or I need to look at next month, what's coming up. And I think that's the reality check there. And again, the debt to equity and stuff like that. Okay, are those periodic KPIs? Is somebody using that if you're trying to borrow money and things like that? But if you look at health of the business, what are those things that really define? Are you doing good? What is that thing that you may not be paying attention to? That hey, how did I go from $1 million inventory to $5 million? And well, if you're watching cash, you're going to figure out that it's going somewhere. Okay, so there's the example where we started with cash. Cash is going to trigger or go look at a second KPI. I think to your point, a lot of CEOs ask somebody to bring them data. These days, it's a lot more connected. CEOs do have connections to dashboards, and they learn how to interact, change dimensions, pivot, change date ranges, the comparisons last year, this year. Great example is of prior year comparisons. A lot of people look at current year, but don't look at prior year. Well, what would that do? It might flag something that you're overlooking. But again, the accounting savvy, and again, but by business, by industry, we all are going to agree there's different operations.
Go ahead, Paul. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would say especially in this current environment, you need to understand there's one set of things that you can look at if you're looking at a steady state business. Okay, yeah, okay, we're moving along, things are going along. We can do all sorts of KPIs and metrics. But when the business isn't stable, you really change the things that the CEO needs to be monitoring. For example, live example, company having a lot of difficulty delivering product. Happens a lot these days because vendors aren't delivering supplies. In one case, live case, the company's market position was, we are going to be the leaders in rapid product development. That's what's going to drive our business. That's the differentiator. Well, when we when we looked at what they were doing in their R&D and product development environment, there were bypasses in the system where sales would call in and say, I got this customer. They're hot on this product. They'll buy tankfuls, especially chemical business. They'll buy tankfuls of this stuff. And we need it now. Well, it's never validated. When you looked into it, it was never validated against capabilities. Wasn't validated. There was no mechanism coordinating between R&D and supply and production. So even if they got something through that system, they could never deliver it on time. So the customer says, "Oh, you can't deliver that on time. After all this, we're on to something else." What that forces is the CEO in that real dynamic situation needs to be looking beyond steady states and looking actually a level down to see what's really happening. And in that case, when we took that look down, they had several hundred project for a staff of 8 people in R&D. It was just completely untenable. And what we had to do was, and the CEO had to drive this and had to pay attention, had to look at what are we actually had to set up a set of criteria that says, this is what it takes. Here's a dozen of the criteria that we have for a project to even be kicked off. So, can we do this? Can we scale this up out of R&D? Can we? Does this take advantage of technology we have, or do we have to develop something? We put together a whole, essentially, gate there to say, how do you get this project started? And it was absolutely critical to them getting the new business in. Okay, when we started, they were at 50% on-time delivery. So there's a metric, and certainly they needed to follow that. But if you looked at where the business was headed, that was a critical piece. So I would say there's lots of things you could look at steady state, but in today's climate, you really need to think one level down in terms of what are those drivers and how are they in fact working. What are you doing in design? If you're short on product from vendors, what are you doing in design to change the design so you can use alternative materials? Or in purchasing, that you could change the specs to widen your access to materials. So I think that's a critical piece in this environment that needs to look at, and it changes what the CEO needs to be looking at. Typically a level down from those steady state metrics.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. So, Mark, I'm actually going to come to you, in the interest of time, because obviously, even though we have short group, we want to make sure that everybody has opportunity to talk. So, Mark, obviously, Chris was talking about a lot of different things, from the macro perspective, and then we got into a little bit of delivery and design scenarios. Some CEOs like Chris, they still like to do database fixes. I would love to do that as well, but I don't know, where CEOs should be drawing the boundary in terms of what KPIs and where they should get into and where they should delegate. So, Mark, over to you. Top KPIs for CEOs.
Yeah. So while Chris laid out a whole plethora of wonderful KPIs that are all important, actually, I think Paul summarized, my view quite well. And that is, as I deal with manufacturing companies, and most manufacturers in North America today are high mix, some level of custom, right? So it is a dynamic environment. It's a dynamic, unpredictable, highly variable type of environment, right? So, and I think those are some of the words Paul was using. I was writing them down. Dynamic, hundreds of projects going on, probably thousands of work orders supporting those projects. R&D, you got the front end of R&D before it can even get to production. It's got to get through R&D. Who's managing R&D so it gets in production in time for it to actually produce and get on time? Never mind all the material issues through the supply chain. So it's hugely challenging. The KPI that we focus on, and again, Paul said it. The clients who come to us are the ones who are at 40, 50, 60% on time delivery, right? Because they're just struggling. And the big struggle is visibility. You've got all these things going on. You don't even realize how much work you have going on. I mean, just today, folks are trying to manage this with traditional methods such as traditional MRP, traditional finite scheduling, and it's just those approaches are just too static. Now you run the scheduling program, you come up with a plan, you bring it out into production, and what happens? It's a very dynamic environment. It changes. Customer calls, changes the due date, a material doesn't show up, your best setup guy calls in sick. So there's all sorts of things you have to look at. So on-time delivery is by far my top KPI. Now, affecting it and improving it is another thing altogether, and there's supporting KPIs that can help drive to that. Ultimately, per Chris, you improve your on-time delivery, you're going to satisfy your customers more. Your lead times are likely to reduce, and whatever you're doing to improve that on-time delivery. Right, so lead time is another KPI. Usually, in terms of on-time delivery improvement, there's a WIP reduction, whether it's a lean initiative or something to that effect, or applying Little's Law in the release of material and these sorts of things. And ultimately, it comes down to throughput, right, and cash flow. So how much, with the resources that I have today, my machines, my people, as precious as they are, because it's so hard to find people, and good ones especially, right, to be working in production for you. How do I utilize those resources to maximize what I can get out the door and maximize that cash flow through Europe?
So very interesting insights there. And obviously, I think, size is probably going to be a most important factor in general, which KPIs the CEOs are going to care for. If you are talking about 5, 10, 15, $20 million company, then obviously the CEOs are probably going to worry about a lot of operational KPIs. But let's say if you're a $1 billion company, then you are playing at a different level. I don't know how many CEOs are going to be worried about the on-time delivery. So obviously that's also a factor. So overall, I mean, the whole idea of KPIs for CEOs when we are thinking of the series is, let's say if you had to pick a couple, sometimes you are probably going to be in the weeds and you lose the focus because you don't have that strategic focus that CEOs should be focusing on, because that's their job. Again, when you are a $5 million shop, you are still probably wearing a lot of different hats. So you probably don't need to worry about these things. So Mark, I mean, any counter, anything, any agreement, disagreement?
I understand what you're saying about size, Sam, but frankly, if you're a manufacturing company of any size, production is the heart of the company. Yeah. And the stronger and faster and better you can make that heart pump its lifeblood, pump material through production, the more money you're going to make, the more that cash flow is going to be affected.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Mark. So Mike, I'm coming over to you. And Mike, obviously you have been the manufacturing CEO, and I'm pretty sure you sort of debated yourself, how much do you want to go get into weeds versus you want to delegate it to somebody. So if I have operational problem, do I call my guy? So depending upon, how many KPIs can you track in a day, because you want to have your life as well. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So it's been mentioned here a couple of times, size always does matter in some way. But I'm looking at the people that I interact, and a lot of times, to me, the CEO needs to watch strategies, develop strategies. So you have to have like a growth strategy, on-time delivery strategy. Does he need to know what I ship today or tomorrow? I don't know, but he has to have a strategy in place to meet that 90% on-time delivery, to meet that whatever that goal is. So to me, it's always talk about what strategies do you have out there. I think Paul mentioned R&D. That was their goal, to be the first to the market, right? Well, how do you measure that on how do you look at it on when? Now, if you develop a product, that doesn't happen overnight. So do I need to look at that KPI every day? But I have to have something in place to say every 60 days, 30 days, 90 days, I got to circle back and see, update that KPI. And then I think that's where the CEO gets involved. One of mine that when I was literally boots on the ground in manufacturing, involved in all of this, I think Chris hit that in many of his said, I used something that's called OE, overall equipment effectiveness. And that's one of the things is, yeah, my machine is running, but first of all, is it running when it needs to run? Does it make the product that it needs to make? Does it make the quality that it needs to make? Does it make it on? And that's all encompassed in OE, overall equipment effectiveness. So to me, that was always one to say, that pinpoints me at the high level at where is my problem coming out. Because if it's quality, yes, I made 100 widgets, but I didn't make my on-time delivery because I had to throw 20 widgets away because I made, excuse my language, crap, right? So now that's going to hit me financial. It's going to hit me on my on-time delivery. So that was one of, for me, always one of the most, because it includes so many of the other ones. It rolls it all up in that big picture saying, hey, okay, drilling down, yes, we have an on-time delivery issue, but in all reality, we made the product. We just didn't get it to the customer. So was it a trucking company? Was it my inventory management? Oh, wait, we made bad widget, right? And that gives you then the feedback, and then you as a CEO, depending on the structure, if you can have to assign a strategy to it or a person on saying, okay, how do we fix? Yes, we made 100 parts, but 25 of them were bad. How do we fix the root cause? And then you measure that to back. And I want to just piggyback something on. We talked about cash flow and revenue. I could tell you a story, walk in a company, a guy tells me he has $27 million in sales. And I said, that's great for the size of the company. Yeah. What's your profitability? Well, really 3%. And I'm like, wow. How long are you going to be around, right? I mean, so his problem wasn't sales on getting cash in. His problem, he wasn't making money on what he was selling. And we all know if you give stuff away, sooner or later you run out, right? So I don't know if that answers you some of the questions you had, Sam, and if not, I can elaborate on it, but I want to give it back to you.
Yeah, no, it does, to be honest. Okay, and I'm gonna build up a little bit on that, and maybe you can offer some more commentary there. So one of the problems that I personally face, and I see other CEOs facing as well. I mean, when you talk about strategy is great, right? But you also have so many different versions of a strategy. Everybody sort of has the idea, obviously, what counts as the good the strategy that can be executed. And one of the challenges that I personally, people and the CEOs facing, they struggle to quantify. Okay. And quantify is going to be, how can you create KPIs that are going to be measurable, that they can measure over the period of time and really hold people accountable who created the strategy. Okay. So how do you, translate a strategy into KPIs from your experience, Mike?
Well, one of the things is in the manufacturing industry, at least the ones that I was in, we have something that's called benchmarking. So we're looking at, and I don't want to use companies here, but we're looking at the leaders of the industry, right? Can I mention a name or not?
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's look at
conversation, Mike.
Let's look at Coca-Cola, right? Everybody knows Coca-Cola. So I'm in the beverage industry. So I benchmark myself if I'm in the same room, right? I benchmark myself against Coca-Cola, and then I look at this. Where am I not meeting or exceeding their standard? And that's where my strategy is coming out. So let's say they're on time. The Coca-Cola truck is at the distributor every time on time. The Coca-Cola truck is at the grocery store. And so how do they get this done? And then you have to develop the strategy to measure that and say, for example, we just don't have enough output to fill that truck to make it. It's not the driving. And then your strategy should be on how do I create the liquid to put it in my can to get it into the truck, because the truck wasn't. So I would say if you struggle with something, benchmark yourself. And a lot of companies, there is government organizations that can give you data, industry organizations can give you data, and say, okay, I'm in the cheese making industry. Go to the cheese making industry association. Say, what is their turnaround time? What's their inventory and they can give you some of those benchmarks, and then you measure yourself against that. Because man, I go back to what I said with profitability. This guy tells me he makes $27 million in sales. That's pretty good money, but 3% profit. So find out why are you not making 18% EBIT, right? Why are you not running an AP that's I feel always comfortable if I have a double digit in the 20s and EBIT, right? Earning before income and taxes. I feel comfortable. Why are you not getting there? What is it? Well, because we are spending so much on this, and well, it's how can I reduce that cost? And then you measure that specific strategy. Okay, I sent my purchasing people out to target low cost suppliers. I'm just making this up as a thing right now. And then you have to deal with this and put those KPIs. When I wasn't running my own business, my boss put that KPI on me and says, it's your responsibility to hit 97% to goal or whatever that goal. And then put me on every Wednesday in the meeting and says, well, you're at 85%. What do you do to gain that extra 13%? What do you do? How do you do this? And then guess what? I go down to my people and says, well, we said we're going to do this. Why did it not work?
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. And before I come to Paul, I'm going to give a quick shout out to our audience, whoever has joined in and commented. And by the way, guys, if you are in the audience, make sure you guys comment something so that I can provide the visibility. Follow Sneha Kumari. It's SNEHA Kumari, amazing on supply chain. One of the best people to follow on LinkedIn. And we have Scott, and Scott is in supply chain as well, so follow him. Amazing guy. He drops in all the time. Scott, SCOTTABOUDREAU is the last name. I hope you can find him. On that note, I am going to move to Paul for commentary from your side. I know, Paul, you have already probably answered the top KPIs. I don't know if you have some more top ones you can talk about that, or I am going to raise a controversial comment here. Maybe you guys are going to have some insights there on that. So I think Mike was talking about the OEE from the manufacturing perspective. Chris, I believe, spoke about utilization. And I don't even know if this comment is going to be controversial or not, okay? But when I look at these two KPIs, I'm thinking that they both are probably utilization of these, if you really think about from the macro perspective. And so in one case, you are looking at machines, which are very expensive. And the second one, labor, especially when you talk about software engineers, very expensive, okay? So in both cases, I think they are very similar KPIs. I don't know if you guys agree, don't agree, so Paul, over to you.
Well, I'll give you another view on a couple things. So OEE is a composite measure.
Okay.
And if you could have 4 different machines all operating at the same OEE and have completely different reasons for that occurring at each machine. So OEE by itself, it's a very high level. But if you really want to get into it, really want to know what's actually happening, you need to decompose that and understand what those different factors are. Resting on OEE, it has a certain measure of usefulness. But if you really want to figure out why, you always need to dive in there. And so, I mean, as utilization, there's a lot of factors that go into that. The EDM machine that didn't have a spare reel of wire there, okay? It's not running. Why is it not running? Okay, well, the next machine, they deferred the maintenance on. So it actually broke down. And the third one, the operator got sick and there was no operator to it. I mean, these are entirely different things. But just to give some added dimension to that kind of metric.
And the worker got COVID, so there we got throw COVID in there. So there
we go. Well, yeah, COVID does everything. And then and I've also found that best practices. You need to add a little question to that, which is for who or for whom, because really you may not have the same situation as the situation that you're benchmarking, and we've found it helpful to take that a step further and think about next practice. Given where we are, what would we here do next to make that a part of our way of doing business? So yes, company size matters, and this is a way to differentiate things that one size company can do, and it's a best practice for them. For them, another company, next practice for them is an entirely different thing, or some variation on that theme that the larger company might not even consider. But maybe as a smaller company, you need to be partnering with three other companies to do something entirely different at one scale. At the next scale, there's a different set of next practice.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. So, Chris, I'm actually coming over to you and opening up the next segment. So, obviously, you can touch on any sort of comments over comments, as well as if you have any stories. Those are my favorites. Or we are talking about really worst KPIs that you have seen in your experience, people tracking those. And sometimes they could be actually funny to be. And I'm going to tear up with one of the KPIs that I have. And I'm like, why would he track this? Okay, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this is a manufacturing company, smart CEO, super brilliant, top guy, and typically when you are tracking manufacturing business, Mark was right, Paul was right, that you are looking at on-time delivery, you are looking at maybe order to cash KPIs or whatever you want to define, but you never sort of track the time, how much time employees are taking. Yes, you are going to clock in on the job, and that's how you sort of track the cost. But you don't micromanage, how much time you are literally taking, and you are not going to over-engineer your entire algorithm just to track the time, how efficient employees are. That's probably not very good for the employee morale. In the legacy days, I guess, I mean, we have seen this. But as a CEO, you want to create the overarching KPIs, and you want to give them freedom rather than coming across as micromanaging. So that's what I have seen from my experience, especially in the manufacturing industries. I've not seen that anywhere else, but in this particular case, they had done it just because they didn't understand how to implement ERP, how to sort of create those KPI funnels. So, Chris, over to you. Any KPIs that you have seen? Yeah.
And I'm going to go back. I didn't overload you on the front end, but honestly, in our world, we live in lots of KPIs, and typically, which one are you focusing on? The one that turned red, or that's yellow and going to head red? And so I've got customers that there could be 40 different metrics, and you're like, oh, which one's important? Well, like I said, it's the one that's trending wrong, yellow and red. The green ones, and I think that the comment about benchmarks, it's a feedback loop, right? We got a box, everything comes out sampled. We tune benchmarks. We take last year's performance, we look at how we did, we set a goal. Let's make that better, and then we measure. Okay, so that's it. We're measuring. And so as you think about variance, and again, I can go down the rabbit hole on the metrics and the operational principles in manufacturing. Hey, I want to look at standard labor variances. Micro, macro. Oh, I'm looking at the P&L. Shop wages don't equal shop applied to manufacturing. Oh, I can't tell which work order is a problem. Macro, micro. So we still have to have the data. But again, the large dashboards that have a lot of different KPIs, and they're by group, the inventory related turnover, inventory values, defects, on production. You have lots of different classifications. But again, what are we focused on? The ones that deviate from goal or from the benchmark by some percentage. And it's real time, right? And those are the ones that get attention. And if you're the CEO, I don't want to look at 3. I want to look at them. Why? Because most of them I'm not paying attention to, but hey, this one's got a problem. It's trending. Drill down. And so the other thing I'll comment on is actionable KPIs. I live in a wonderful world with Microsoft Dynamics F&O where we can take a business intelligence Power BI dashboard, click and drill right through and go right into the transactional activities to remediate change or make a change, as opposed to looking at a report. I got to go over here and do something now. These are connected actions. So if you don't live in a world with actionable BI, that's an evolution that started showing up. It's out there in play, but that means you can go right, drill down. Okay, now I see the problem. Wow, now I'm into the manufacturing order. I can see what's going on. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, I got a problem of variance on an operation, right? These are the ones that'll let us take action. So again, some of the usefulness of BI is just that it has to be actionable. People get buried in paper. They don't know what to do. What decision do I make? Okay, so as these KPIs help lead you to the action, I'm sure Mark has seen some examples too, and Paul and so forth. But that's the big one. It's the variance, it's the goal setting, and you're measuring performance of these metrics against goal, and you're revising them, right? How did we do last year? Well, I'm raising some of my performance criteria, and great. Now we reset, we're performing, we're measuring. But I think that, even as the CEO, is he going to want to look at all the KPIs? I'd want to see them all. Why not? They're all important. I think that's the thing is you're like, okay, which one's the most important? Which one do I look at every day? But it's macro, click, micro, micro. And I think those are the worlds that we need to evolve to. But the actionable thing is a big deal, and the other in triggers. So then we go back to autonomous behavior that sits behind KPIs. Wow. I don't have to call anybody. I don't even have to look at it. And guess what? System took action. So now that we've got artificial intelligence living behind business intelligence, we can drive behaviors. And so again, we're kind of getting onto that realm of, well, how do we really use KPIs to run the business? Well, people are part of it. Don't get me wrong, but to get automation and to get actionable, whether there's a person taking the action or whether there's an autonomous function in there that triggers a behavior, triggers a change, triggers a notification. Again, now we're taking people and stepping them back, and we're letting the system really take these metrics versus goals, looking at variance. What's the tolerance? That tolerance was tripped. I got a 911 alert. I'm going to get an email. And that's where we really start letting KPIs help us run the business, as opposed to somebody had to show up, look at it, make a decision. That's old school. I'm sorry, but we're getting a little more. But again, those are things I'd like to share with the audience, because as you're looking at, and again, it doesn't matter what ERP system you have. You want to come layer Power BI anywhere, you can do that. You can add code and actions behind Power BI. You just have to have the right technical professionals know how to do that. But you can do that almost in any system where what's the most important and what's the one where you can't rely on a human to make a timely decision that could really impact the business. And they're slow moving KPIs, right? Oh, okay, that one, inventory value is too high. We're not going to fix it overnight. That's going to be a concerted strategy, is how do you bring down inventory value if you've overstocked and you're trying to watch cash? But that's a longer term metric, right? There's short term metrics, long term metrics. Shipping performance is one of those things that, hey, we're watching it. How do we remediate it? And then, but recovery isn't going to be, and again, then within how we address shipping performance, we may have sub metrics we're watching that are really determine how do we impact shipping performance. First was like, well, how quickly did we release the order? Well, what was the fill rate? Okay, well, what are all those things impacting shipping performance? Sub metric. So the concept of a metric and a sub metric, because we got to click, we got to drill down. Paul said it. How do I really see what's causing this behavior? And it's not going to be one thing, but that's challenging for people. And what I would say is it's evolution. There's a lot of math. Worst KPIs, the calculations are wrong. I'll just say that right now. I've had people that have constructed KPIs and for whatever reason, they didn't prove out their math, and there was a circumstance that failed, and they looked at it, made a decision, and we got to go rebuild the KPI. But I think that what you're hearing is validation. So once you build these things, test them. Make sure that the math holds true under all circumstances so you can trust them, because your confidence in looking at the KPI said it's red. I got to believe there's a problem. Okay, I got to believe that. But you got to be able to click, get to that next level, and really be able to investigate at a very micro. But again, I'm not going to list all because there's hundreds. There's hundreds that are important. And again, which one do I look at? Red. I want to see it yellow, actually, before it goes red.
Love it. Click, click, click. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So, Mark, coming over to you. Any comments over comments? Any stories? And the charitable or funny KPI?
So a couple things. One is you typically improve what you measure, right? Companies find that, especially in the manufacturing. So that can be good and bad, right? When you put the KPIs out there, hey, these are the important metrics. So folks understand that, and they'll tend to drive towards that really well. On the flip side, I think you were touching on this, Sam, around efficiency. Is if you're not sure of your like your cycle times, for example, or especially human related tasks like assembly or things like that, right? You go out, well, we need to know what our tack time or our cycle times are, right? You go out and measure it, and people know they're being watched, and they're going pretty fast. When the camera's off or the person with the stopwatch is gone, right, then things are a little bit different, right? So reality can be very different from the metrics from that standpoint. Switch topic a little bit on utilization, and you said you wanted to be controversial. This may be very controversial, but that is measuring utilization, right? Especially in manufacturing companies. I want to be clear, because there's different types of, but in a manufacturing company, we see this, right? You walk around, you take a factory tour, and you see in different departments the graph with the utilization. You can see that utilization is a KPI, and it's being driven, right? The thing with driving utilization is, and honestly, I just learned this, a few years ago, is that there is a direct, inverse, exponential correlation between utilization and queue. The higher your utilization, the longer your queue times are going to be in any department. What does that mean? Your lead times are going to get longer. The better your utilization is across departments, the longer your lead time through production. So there's a balance point, and really the balance point, or the sin we often see. Mike touched on it a bit. 20% of what you produced is is not worth using, right? But the other sin you do is what my dad used to call wow years, right? Well, while you have an order that you can ship for 100 this month, just build 500 more, right? We'll save the setup. You're going to be efficiency. Your utilization will be up, right? And that's the so there's a balance point between what you want and really what it comes down to. And now, a la Ellie Goldratt and the goal is if you can find out where your bottleneck is today and where your bottleneck will be in the future, and then maximize utilization in the bottleneck, that's where you want to be. And the utilization in the work center supporting the bottleneck, it really doesn't matter in the overall sense of maximizing.
Yeah, so amazing insight. So I'm definitely going to have a little follow-up there for you, Mark, for the audience so that they can follow along. So you might want to unpack a little bit there. So when you are saying when you increase the utilization time, the lead time increases. So do you have any more colors there?
Any what? I'm sorry?
Just clarification in terms of how does that work so that audience can follow along. Yeah.
Sure. So by utilization, I mean, how much, not sure how to clarify
and
this.
If anybody else can help, I mean, see,
I learned it. I learned it in a book called Factory Physics, quite honestly, where it lays out kind of the mathematical explanations. But essentially, the more so what happens is if you're driving utilization in certain departments, even if you don't have material, like if previous operations and jobs aren't done, folks will go find material to get things going. So the more and more material that's in WIP, the longer your lead times are going to be, the slower it's going to be to get anything through WIP. Similarly, on the reverse side, the less WIP you have, the faster things are going to be able to flow through WIP, so your lead times reduce. And that's really what it's. So as that utilization goes up, you're always trying to keep things as busy as possible, so your queue times get longer and longer.
You might think of that as, if this machine is always busy, we're never going to find a time slot where we can put something new in there. So we're going to wait. And then the next one comes and we're busy again. So we're still going to wait. And all of those waits add up to increased queue time. I mean, that's a very simplistic view of that, but that's the dynamic. Essentially, if you look at production as a funnel, the further you get into production, the more capacity you want available to handle all of the variations. And if you essentially restrict that capacity because you've got these machines already running flat out, you lose that capability and flexibility, and things start to wait around in material, and you get that and you get that effect. I also like the factory physics. That's a good thing. One of the things that I saw was, so here's a metric that says we're going to track first run quality. Very noble. Sounds great. So what they found was, okay, they get, again, especially chemical, they run in, they manufacture the product, it goes into quality to test it, and it comes back rejected. Didn't meet the spec. And they do some modification and they send it back into quality and it gets rejected. Okay, fine. And when you looked at it, you'd look at that, you look at what's happening there, and it seems like the operator, engineering, or there's something wrong in that side of it that's not producing material to spec. When you looked underneath that, the guy who was the head of quality would reject anything that wasn't at the center of the spec distribution. So he by himself is gating the production of the whole facility by this test standard. And I didn't, at that point, I didn't need to ask because I knew what the answer was. I said, do you know what what the capability of your test is? I mean, can you discriminate within that spec range? Can you discriminate where you are, or is your process capability for your test outside the range of the spec? No answer. Seemed like perfectly logical metric, perfectly logical KPI. Absolutely meaningless until you did the KPI in your test procedure and then accept the fact that you can accept things knowing where your test is at, within the spec range, not necessarily just at the center. So it wasn't an obvious bad KPI. Good KPI. All the process below it didn't match what they were actually.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Paul. Chris, you had a comment as well in between? Clarification?
Yeah, I think that is Mark's utilization comment. You're right. You heard the metrics I threw out there. We talked about utilization backlog, and I made the customer service comment because you're right. We don't strive for 100% utilization in our services team. So in manufacturing, you might say, oh, we want 100% utilization. But there's no flexibility in the schedule is the problem, right, Mark? And so you have no capacity to pivot, rework. In the services world, we don't want to be at 100% capacity also, because if new opportunities show up, you can't respond. And so it is a delicate balance. Do you max out and then you delay somebody else if something shows up, right? Somebody gets preempted versus you've got a little bit of capacity, so you've got that flexibility. But I think those are important ones for different industries to figure out what's the right thing, because even to that point is I'll lose my delivery schedule. Right now, we're way out here because we talk about backlog. Well, what do? We add more capacity, right, Mark? Oh, right, we need a second shift. We got to, and there's a measure, right? Oh, when do I add more capacity? Well, when that backlog and this and you're right, it's right, and that's it. We need more capacity. So a variety of metrics that'll lead you to that decision, though, right? Hey,
love it. And I don't know if
Chris
we lost
just
Chris. Yeah. So okay. So if we lost for everybody. Okay, over to you, Mike. I know we are short on time.
Yeah.
So
we've got a little bit of room.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, Chris, you're back. Okay, I'm actually gonna go to Mike now. So Mike, comments over comments, any stories, and any sort of terrible or funny KPIs in your experience?
Well, I don't know if it's a funny KPI, but we had a CEO that wanted to had us measure the fuel consumption of our trucks. We were a manufacturing company. We are also, and he was so fast. Fuel prices is a big expense. And he measured on, just like Paul said, we finally drilled down why this is. Well, all the trucks, they were going fully loaded west. They're driving into the wind, right? So they needed more fuel than the trucks going east and then coming empty back west. Man, it's a normal physics, right? Yeah. You have a 80,000 pound truck going into 25 mile an hour headwind, same model, right? And he was actually so fascinated with this that the drivers, and we put monitors in it, and the trucks were maintained and everything to the same standard till somebody actually said, where do those trucks go? Right? Man, this CEO spent literally days and weeks and had people chasing. And again, his driver was the fuel cost, right? Because, we need to make that up. And the other one, and that's really one that I never understood, we had a person measuring attendance and I'm like, what does that tell you when people go to meet? My question would be, what comes out of the meeting? How productive is the meeting? But no, hey, I showed up to every meeting this year, right? So I get 500 meetings, I get the gold star. I never said a word. I never did anything. I never contributed to the team to anything. But I have the gold star because my attendance was perfect, right? I even signed up this was the joke. I even signed up for meetings I'm not even required, right? Just so I get the gold star. I'm like, why would it attract something non-tangible like attendance to the meeting versus productivity or things accomplished in the meeting, outcomes of the meeting? So I think that's the two that I always shook my head at it and said, really? You have nothing to do, so you can watch meeting attendance as a KPI.
Love it. Thank you so much, Mike, for that. I know we have 3 minutes right now. We can probably take one more comment from you, Paul. Chris, you have a comment?
No, I was just saying, there is a really cool KPI that we built for a client, and these guys have about 1 million square feet of warehouse, and they pick and pack ships, and they, during COVID, went direct to consumers. So they're doing tens of thousands of picks a day. And so the analytics, we built them as a dashboard that looks at picker performance. And it's pretty slick. So, if you're picking thousands of pairs of shoes, you better be good. But that's a graphical view of the workers out in the shop, out in the warehouse, and charts behavior. So pretty cool. Everybody's like, really picking performance down to the worker. And again, in warehouse applications, that may be something, an example. It was a custom dashboard for this customer to really monitor who's their champions out there in the warehouse and where are the bottlenecks, et cetera, et cetera. So another great example of just being creative as to, is that an important part of his business? Yeah, he's looking at velocity of how quick are they picking those hundreds of thousands of pairs of shoes per day, but it's all creative.
Very interesting. So I guess, I'm probably going to have one quick comment there, Chris, on that comment. So, typically, if you look at the warehouse systems, they are probably going to have pick per hour. I guess that's the And I don't know if I'm correct here or not, but I mean, so was it similar or different?
It's just graphical representation. There wasn't this particular exhibit or this dashboard out of the box in our solution. So again, remember, Dynamics incorporated a warehouse management system in there. I'm sure they've got analytics on picker performance, but this was it was a custom dashboard, and that's it. And I think that as owners, if people listen to this, is you don't have to deal with just out of the box. Again, noodle it on Excel and say, okay, can we build this if the data points are available?
Yeah.
But part of that is that evolution of thought as to how do you measure. And it's not going to be the same in 6 months. It's not going to be the same in another 6 months. But that's a perfect example. Is this guy needed a custom view to manage his people differently than it showed up out of the box. That's it.
And
Constructive.
I would add one expansion of that thought, and we've seen this in warehouse operation. The picker performance was one aspect. The put away performance was a whole different aspect. That if you really look, you really needed to look at the whole thing, because the put away performance was dismal, and then the pickers who got to pick from the good locations looked like stars. And if they hit the bad location where the material was scattered all over the place in a location, gave you another view. Again, it's what are you looking at? How deep do you need to go to really understand driving?
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Paul. So we are really close to our time now, and we are probably going to be short on closing advice. So I'm just going to pick one person for the closing advice. Mark, can I have you do the closing advice if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. If you're, take a look at, I think everybody would agree, take a hard look at what KPIs you're using today, that you have supporting objective information underneath that, whether it's, picking people, people type metrics, machine type metrics, overall financial cash flow metrics, and make sure you have the underlying information that's going to support those in an objective way for you.
All right, amazing. Great advice. Thank you so much, guys, for joining today. So that's it for the show. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another KPI topic. On that note, thanks everyone for joining in tonight.
Take care, everybody.
Good seeing everybody.
Have a good night.
Take care.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Chris Gherardini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's turnkeytech.com. If you want to learn more about Mark Lilly, head over to lilyworks.com. It's LILLYWORKS.com. If you want to learn more about Mike Slagenhofer, head over to equity.com. It's ACUITY.com. If you want to learn more about Paul Weigel, head over to 4abetterbusiness.com. It's 4 letter A BETTERBUSINESS.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Nirav Shah, who shares his insights into the process challenges of make-to-order manufacturers. Also, the interview with Megan Gamble, who shares her insights into building the systems for the packaging industry. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.